council joint meeting. We have some new faces that we like to introduction to. It's 12
Okay,
p.m.
I'll introduce myself.
The newest member.
face.
So it's 12 p.m. on Thursday, February 11th, 2016. We're meeting in room 310 of the City Council Conference at 351 West Center in Provo. And we will begin the meeting with roll call. Ms. Jorgensen, please start. Louise Jorgensen. Kevin Ray.
Dave Sewell.
Sam Lynn.
George Brooks. George Stewart.
Wayne Parker.
Gary Winterton.
Mark C. Strand.
Dave Hardy.
Kim Santiago.
Dave Connect.
Steve Downs.
Thank you. So we will have the opening prayer by Mr. Hardy.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to be gathered together for this joint session of our city's councils. We ask for inspiration and direction as we discuss and decide on issues that are facing our cities. We ask that you to help us to be able to express our ideas and to understand each other. We ask for blessing upon our cities, the residences thereof, as we pray in the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Let's begin with some introductions. Let's just give a brief introduction, maybe some of his interests. And start with Ms. Ray.
I'm new to council. My background, I used to run the American Fork Chamber of Commerce, as well as economic development, so I've been in that realm. My greatest claim to fame is I have 19 grandchildren, and my husband and I met at the Winter Olympics, so we're about service volunteering and excited to serve Orem and been in Orem for about 22 years.
They were both participating in the downhill, so.
Actually, Soldier Hollow up at,
Oh,
yeah.
That's fun.
So I'm excited to serve, and I'm a Rotarian. What else? I'm involved in the Utah Valley Chamber, the Women's Business Network. I like to cook, so
We're excited to have her.
I'm halfway through my first term. I came up to Provo as a student. Been here ever since. Got married, started a business here. Loving it here. First got interested in city politics through the city's neighborhood program.
Sam Lynn, just started in the Orem City Council. I've actually just reached the point, I think, where I've lived in Orem longer than I lived in Provo, because I went to BYU a few years ago. But we love it here. We actually just had a new baby boy that was born a week after the election, so it's been a lot of new change in our household for the last few months. But I'm excited to serve and work in the technology industry, so I'm excited about all the things happening in the tech industry here.
Glad to have a millennial who moved from Provo to Orem, giving us help in that way. I'm Mayor Bruns, so lived in Orem for a long time, enjoying working with her.
I'm George Stewart. My greatest claim to fame is my wife has been with me for 52 years. We have 11 children and 47 grandchildren. That keeps us busy. In addition to the council, I have a background in business and public service, and I'm excited to be back on the council.
Wayne Parker, and Provo City Chief Administrative Officer.
I'm Gary Winterton, and I guess I'm new because I'm a new grandpa. I joined as of tomorrow, yesterday. And there, after our concert, they were thinking about having my grandson be named Russell Hitchcock. I don't think so. I said, please don't do that to him. We just had air supply come to the Covey Center last night.
You did this?
And if he does, I hope he'll play the piano rather than.
I thought I saw you in a video up there dancing.
No, there but not dancing. Corey was dancing.
Did you see me?
Yeah, I saw.
I was partying like a rock star.
But we had a good time, and I'm just beginning my second term.
Cool. Mark C. Strand, been on the council for a little bit. I took a new job.
How long?
10 years. Yeah, so I took a new job with UVU back in April, and I am working with the Entrepreneurship Institute. So we get to work quite a bit. I really enjoyed the interactions I had with Scott Bowles and with Brian at Orem City, just trying to make the connection of how these students can come out with an environment that's really flourishing with new business startup. A lot of fun stuff going on there in the tech sector, as well as a lot of the other sectors. So it's really fun to see not only city councils, how we work together, but also how we work together in business development. It's pretty fun.
Dave Harding, I was elected last November. I represent Provo's Central District, and glad to be here.
I'm Santiago, and I am number 4 and registered nurse. I work in oncology, work with cancer and medical patients, and didn't have a political bone in my body 3 years ago. But I was working as, or was volunteering as a PTA president for elementary school, and kind of got involved in some political things, and found that I actually really enjoyed it a lot. So being involved and really enjoyed it. And something of interest, I left for basketball. I'll still play as long as the girls will let me play. They're all younger, they're all millennials, they're all or way younger, just graduated from college. So they, I don't know, it's something that I love to do twice a week.
Dave Peck. I've been involved with Provo City and sometimes the county. That was my first experience. Convincing the counties that they shouldn't build their jail in Provo. Spanish Court was a better option. So I worked in the neighborhood program for many years. Was on the city council during the Olympics, and my boys said, you know, you got to stay home and be our dad instead of running again. So I did that, and I took a 10-year vacation. Now I'm back.
Well, I'm John Curtis, and I'm really delighted to be here with you to see faces that are, I was going to say old and familiar, I always say faces that are familiar. And new faces, and look forward to working with you.
Steve Downs, Orem City Manager's Office. Jamie apologizes he couldn't be here. He's double booked 100%. So, been with the city about 2 years. Before that, lived in Mesa, Arizona, worked in the city of Mesa. Really enjoyed being back in the valley. My wife's from Orem, originally, so good to be home for her. Sad to be away from the family for me.
And I'm Corey, and I work in the mayor's office. Do whatever the mayor only asks me to do, or at least act like I can do that.
Thank you. You're welcome. Welcome to everybody. Fun to get to know you a little bit. So the first item of business is a discussion on the local match funding for bus rapid transit. And appreciate the committee that has been formed with Provo, Orem, the county, MAG, and UDOT, and UT. I think that's a really important group moving forward. And there were some questions that council members had, and thought we would bring up again. These are items that affect both of our cities, and it's really good to have this conversation. And Mr. Stewart had some particular questions in particular, so I think I'll find you.
Well, I'm new on the council and haven't been involved in PRP, but I understand the council should be asked to approve leasing a road for 50 years, lead the local nets. I didn't know those local nets as part of the whole program. That's sort of what all these local nets look, how you're handling that.
Well, we feel like the bus rapid transit is an important mass transit item. I don't know if you're aware, but the federal budget for 2016 on table 7 for these kinds of mass transit items does list a federal match of money for $70.9 million, which has been approved. And we have received already $4 million from the federal government from a previous obligation from 2008 that has been unused. We do have the commitment from UDOT to about $30 million for widening the parkway, and then 65 million approximately is coming to our associated governments, through MAG and so forth, for the third quarter extension.
Bond.
Yes, the bond itself actually would be done by the county, and then that bond will be paid off and purchased back from this about, I think it's 12 years or 17 years, but I believe it's 12 years. So it's a very good project that way, in the sense that we already have revenue that is funding this through the quarter-cent sales tax that was approved by the voters back in 2006, and was approved twice. And so it's a very good project. Like I say, it's about $190 million project that we are participating in for 1/3 of the cost. We believe that mass transit is very important. I remember when they were looking at tracks in downtown Salt Lake, and there were concerns whether that would be used and how that would affect the city. And the use rate on that is double or triple what they ever planned on. Front Runner the same way. We have a intermodal center in Orem, as Provo has one as well. Our intermodal center is almost completely full. We have students or a business wing. This would allow for an east-west transportation program to occur, and so it's a project that's about 10 years in the making. And again, with the federal government and UDOT fronting 2/3 of it, we feel like it's a really good project.
My question was on the local match. You have a local match in Orem, like we're going to have to have one here, and how are you meeting that? That's pretty much fair with the other.
So Chad, I don't know if you want to clean that up.
The local match is, because it's a regional local match, but the sales tax, that's the majority of it. The project is also a road project and a transit project, but there is the same lease agreement that Orem has that Provo has.
Well, the actual money is.
Yeah, in terms of the money, I mean, it's coming through the sales tax.
Right.
And so that's what.
Which has already been passed and is already funded and actually already occurring.
Right.
So we're not pulling money out of Provo, we're not pulling money out of Orem necessarily. We're using our already existing funds that have been passed by the public.
For transportation purpose.
I was told the local match is going to come from the leasing of the roads, and I wonder how that works.
Only a small portion of it is very small. Very
Small portion doesn't tell me anything.
Okay, I haven't quantified it, but it's very small. The majority, the 65 million or so, is coming out of the bond. So it's a very small portion of the issues of the leasing for the road.
Can you also clarify what needs to be leased from the cities? For instance, University Avenue, University Parkway is leased from the state, cities.
Right. So really, the lease is pretty much on the 7th floor. Is the lease through Provo? That's the existing area. That's also
Any place there's a fixed guideway, so if it's runs down the center of the street, for example, in its own lanes, then that's leased. And any place where there's a station, so anything that's fixed, constructed on or around the streets, are involved. So there's actually 3 lease agreements. There's one with Provo, one with Orem, and one with UDOT.
Because you don't have University Avenue, for example.
And University Parkway. Right. So again, ours is only really related to specific station locations, for example, on University Parkway by the MTC, on 900 North, on the south end of BYU, along 7th North, where the fixed guideway will be there. Orem's is only specifically, I think, related to station locations, and maybe a little bit in the roundabout, I guess.
That's about it.
Fourth
These are state roads, these are not city roads.
Most of them.
So our portion and Provo's portion is very little, and as far as any matching funds, 98% of it's being paid through the quarter-cent sales tax that's already been approved.
So Orem matching portion will come from the leasing of the roads, like they're asking Provo to do.
We will sign a lease, and Provo will sign the lease.
Like, quit 50 years, by 50 years?
So the length of time, I think, I don't know if the rationale behind it years, but I'm not sure. But I think it's considered a life of a project about that. 50 years would be a time when we are reevaluate what that project is like. And
The 50 years doesn't have anything to do with the amount of money that the 50-year lease raises, or does it?
So I think it's just, I think it's related, my understanding is it's related to FTA requirements.
So we get the minimum lifetime.
My understanding, having just sat in on some of these conversations previously, is that the question was, do we really want to go 50 years? And the quick response from UTA, I believe it was who was responding, said anything less than 50 years isn't considered, doesn't cross the threshold of where it can qualify for the matching grants or matching funds. Sorry. So the point is if we do only 45, well then we can't consider that portion as part of our matching funds, and we would have to come up with slightly more money.
That's not what I heard.
Match.
I heard differently just a minute ago.
And okay,
that he's probably, I haven't been sitting on those discussions, so I believe that that's the minimum that's correct, that could be counted as a local match portion, which is just invaluable.
so when we explored a little bit like, well, what if we come up with a little bit more money so we don't have to lease it for 50 years? And UTA, again, this is all from memory, but if I remember correctly, UTA said, well, we wouldn't be comfortable putting infrastructure on something that we couldn't have a full 50-year lease on. We wouldn't feel comfortable putting permanent infrastructure on something that we would have, would continue to have use for at least 50 years. And so that's kind of where that matching grant, I don't think, or the matching funds, I apologize, I keep this speaking, but where the matching funds comes in is it's an FTA requirement, but it is just a very small portion. But so it's kind of that dual thing. Why does it have to be 50 years? Well, it's permanent infrastructure, and they don't want to put it on something that they have a short-term lease on. And then secondly, because it's 50 years, you can use we use that as part of our matching funds for the FTA.
I'm going to push back from constituents, but 50 years, they say, why 50 years? We have no idea what it was in like 50 years from now. So that's why I brought it up. I
think it's related to the useful life of the improvements. So a station should last 50 years. In addition to that, again, it reduced the amount that the county had to bond. Had we not done the lease agreements, we've had to come up with that extra money through the bond, which would have taken it out for a longer period of time. So again, I think it's just an attempt to utilize FTA's standards to maximize the value of that lease and to minimize the amount they have to bond against.
Would it affect the bottom amount?
It would have affected the bottom line. We had to, yeah, we would have to come up with additional several $1 million in addition to that on the bond.
10 million?
I think, my recollection is 8 to 10, but I'd have to go back and double check that.
I think there was also something as far as 50 years goes, it could be shortened should UTA decide that the project is not viable anymore, that they would rather do something else. That after that 50-year period, the lease would revert back to the cities or the state.
When not, you'd still be on the council, so.
It would have been nice to know if that was FTA's requirement, 50 years. We know that for sure, that they're requiring 50 years. Because we have to renew it in 50 years, we can renew it in 25, and we could renew it,
Let me double check.
shorter duration.
It's what I've heard in meetings, but I'm not done with it. FTA regs to what we should have.
Now, UTA
Look at it from the private sector standpoint.
Typical.
In a building, a little bit different than transportation, because we don't know what transportation is going to look like in 50 years. It could be something way beyond, buses. We just don't know what it's going to look like in 50 years.
And again, it seems like we've had this conversation before, but with UTA, I'm not sure which meeting that was with. Maybe I've seen that meeting, that transportation will go to advisory committee as part of it before taking office. Their response is, UTA has no interest in running a system that's not working well. And so while we want that 50-year lease in order to put infrastructure on it, it's
determined later on that we need to change the route, or if there's a new mode of transportation that works better, they would just give up the lease. The bigger expense might be just having to take out the infrastructure, but their point was they weren't interested. If it's not working, they wouldn't be interested in continuing to use it for the full 50 years. So if things change,
How do you know if it's not working, I guess, is the other side of that, because they see right now that transportation is subsidized. So subsidized, does that mean it's working, not working? And how do you decide what's working and who decides if it's working or not? And so I guess there are both sides to that.
Interesting thought, 50 years ago, we didn't really have the diagonal University Parkways. And we are going to be looking at a tremendous amount of population growth. So I feel like this is a very important project for that. It's meant to take about 30% of the wear and tear off University Parkway. It's going to bring our pollution levels down. It'll help with the cars. It's kind of like Front Runner. I believe, if I'm saying this right, Chad, Front Runner, they figured it's taking off 1.5 to 2 lanes off the freeway.
Right, no, that's on peak hour. Just from a historical perspective, my grandparents lived in American Fork, the Robinsons, Chipmans, and I remember just as a young kid a lot of stories about them riding the interurban that went from, that's how people got to Salt Lake back then. And so when you say we don't know what transportation is going to like in 50 years, yeah, that's true. But my suspicion is we'll still have buses, we'll still have trains, we'll still have different forms of it. But even from 70 years ago, we were highly dependent on the mass transit as a key part of our society growing up. So I think we'll change. Yeah, and it's interesting that they put the tracks back down where they pulled them up a number of years ago. So the 50-year mark to me doesn't seem too significant. I mean, really looking long term, you want these things to be functional, viable. We see railroad tracks that have been in place out over there in the Vineyard area for centuries. So,
What's the anticipated ridership, and are we anticipating what's coming between the two universities, or do you have an idea? Something in?
Yeah, we're projecting about 12,000 riders a day is what we're looking at right now. And a lot of it, when we started this project, and I was here at the beginning, 12 years ago, which was crazy to see, we really lined up all the key traffic generators, all the main places people are traveling to, the malls, the campuses, the downtown Provo area, all that area that's important, and lined them all up and connected them with the commuter rail. And so that's the idea, is that you would have these main generators, and also the commuter rail would function, and you would collect and distribute people to commuter rail by the BRT alignment. So people could come down from Salt Lake, leave their cars in Salt Lake, and ride commuter rail down to a BYU game, for instance, and not even impact the traffic we have there.
And current ridership for that, for the 8:30?
For the 8:30 is about 7,000 right now. So.
A day?
Yeah.
Are we in talks with BYU and UVU to see if we have some kind of agreement to get discounts for students to encourage them?
Yeah, UVU is currently on a pass program right now with ETA. They buy that as part of their student fees. They have a free pass to ride. We did that a few years ago with BYU, and then they reversed course for some reason and started charging for transit and free parking, which is obviously what we wanted to have happen. We're hoping that they'll, and they're working right now with the team to develop a really neat bus plaza on the south end of campus, and so we're hoping that means that they're interested in looking at the system and maybe integrating it into their campus a little bit more. So hoping for positive results.
There are 5,400 UVU students living south and west of BYU campus. With their subsidized passes, obviously. Are there other questions or comments? We'll move on to the next item then. Discussion on the affordable housing options in Orem and Provo. And this is something that we've been looking at as council in the past couple of years. we have some demographic maps. And actually, I think I'll turn the time over to Bryce to just sort of introduce it.
All right.
Bryce Mumford is our policy analyst.
This is a new system, so I'm not really sure how
Everybody's gonna stare at me, see if I'm trying to say if I'm impressed.
Show us your movie you put on last night, Clark.
Oh, this, no, you don't want to see that. Again.
I apologize if
Or you need to do
my
the
voice
site.
is gone.
Say it. I knew every song that was played, every word.
It's coming on
Reset.
the microphone up here, if you want to use the microphone.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure if the reset part. Let's see.
This is our great experiment. Let's see what happens.
You guys are all part of the.
Experiment. We just got to see.
While he's doing that, can I just give a shout out to Josh Irid? He's our IT in his department, and they've kind of given our technology an overhaul here and in our chambers. So I'd like to thank Josh and his.
Looking for microphones director.
That's the microphone.
All right. So you should be able to hear me pretty well with this new system. Okay, we're going to start. And you know, I just pulled up a couple of maps that kind of show some of the affordable housing distribution in Utah County and Provo. And so I'll walk through each one of these. If you want to discuss them, just stop me. But this one right here is just the estimated typical median family income from 2009 to 2013, and you can see, most of a lot of the Provo and Orem area, it's 20,000 or less, and as it gets darker green, it increases up to 100,000 plus. And so the lighter areas indicate more of a lower median income than the darker areas. So I'll go to the next one. This is a kind of an interesting map. It shows the percent of total population that lived in subsidized housing in 2013. And the darker, that means there's more concentration of subsidized housing. And so I actually think we have this one in the Provo Orem area, so it's a little closer. So you can kind of get a better feel for where in Provo and Orem those areas are located. Again, the darker areas indicate a large percentage of subsidized housing. And as it gets lighter, that means that there's either no data or there's no low percentage of subsidized housing. And so, you want the crossroads? You can probably zoom in a little bit.
Sure.
Okay, here's BYU. UVU is going to be over.
Right up on the parkway.
Where you work. So, kind of an interesting map. Just kind of shows the distribution.
I'm curious what road that is that says Curtis.
Is that a neighborhood?
That's supposed to be a surprise.
Subsidized housing.
So the darker green is where we have the most subsidized housing.
It's a higher concentration. 11.51% or more of these houses in here are subsidized houses.
But bring that up so you can see that. 1860 runs through the middle of that. South of 1860, I'm not aware of anyone living, especially over in the Ironton area. There's one street.
They're by census tract.
Yeah, it's by tract.
The whole census tract is colored the same.
So
regardless
this
of
entire tract right here is one tract.
So the heavy concentration is probably up north, close to the cemetery.
There you go. Okay.
So it covers the whole census tract.
Thank you.
One of the thought, if you scroll up to Orem again, I think the first thing I think when I see that is, the Provo really is the epicenter for this subsidized housing. But much of Orem I see is gray, which is insufficient data. So it's not saying that there isn't subsidized housing there. It's just saying that
the data is not available.
Not available. Yeah.
So move to the next one. All right. So up here it explains what a qualified census tract is. And I'm going to read it so that I don't mess it up. So qualified census tracts are areas designated for a higher eligible basis of low-income housing tax credit program. And so these kind of purplish areas are what have been designated as qualified census tracts. And so if we scroll down here, and this is all Utah County, you don't see much up around here, but if you get down here, that same area in Orem and a lot of these areas in Provo all qualify for low-income housing tax credit programs. And so they're attractive for developers if they buy large areas of land down here, and they can use that low-income housing tax credit to fund some of their developments. And so just kind of a interesting map.
I'm sorry, I can wait until the end to ask questions. So our council's had this discussion going for a while, like what is creating this? Why are we having so many developments that are low income tax credit developments? And I look at that, this map, and it tells me the reason we have so much of it is because this is the only place in the valley it can go, other than that sliver up in Orem. And so where we're having the discussion and they're telling us, oh, well, you know, you control that with your zoning and whatnot. To me, this is kind of the antithesis of what we've been talking about, hoping to spread these higher need residents throughout the county. And it looks like this policy is doing the exact opposite. It forces the concentration into the small area.
Could we get a clarification maybe from Provo as to the amount, the quantity, the newness of low-income subsidized housing? Here in Orem, we're not seeing very much, if any, but I think it's a big issue for Provo, and I'm not up on this, so I would just like to know more, like how many complexes are being built that are low income? Are you seeing proliferation of this in an area? Maybe you can bring us up to date on that.
In the Franklin neighborhood, we have, it's a neighborhood that's just sort of south and west of the city center. There, we have a neighbor works project that went in, or is going in. Just right now. That one is a low income project. We have started crossing that's 80%. And this one is how many units? 59 units. That one has some like education, and he can tell you a lot more about the neighbor works, but there are some controls in place that will maybe help with that development. It's the whole emphasis is on helping them become long-term residents, homeowners, and so that's actually like a training ground for homeowners. But we have started crossing that just went in close to the transit station, and that is 80% low income through low income housing tax credits.
And how big is that?
And how many units is it? 100? And so the issue with that particular neighborhood is we're already hearing from the Franklin neighborhood and the Franklin school and the school district that they feel like they're overwhelmed. And we have areas there that that are using a large amount of city resources already. And so that's the concern, is if we can support, we have to be able to support what goes in as well. And so we're hoping that we can spread that out so that there's adequate support. We are close to the Community Action Food Bank there. We have the Food and Care Coalition that's just across the in East Bay. So we do have city resources and county resources. We're a county seat, so we have some of those resources. And but we're to a point with some of our neighborhoods that the anchor families feel like we will move if it becomes any more overwhelming. They just don't feel like they can handle it, and the schools are telling us that they're.
So how is it overwhelming? In other words, are the schools having to provide breakfast for these?
Yeah, free reduced lunches for those students and breakfast for those students. There are kids that will go to the principal's office for food. If they don't have food, she'll offer snacks. This is what the school board told us last week. And so they are seeing, they do have Title I, Title I schools, so they do get some federal money, but they're feeling like they're getting to sort of the point where they don't know how much more they can take in certain areas.
Much of this one development is now called the pole. I don't know if you at least 3.
Where are the bowlers for that?
Boulders
911 calls. And they get calls because dishwashers aren't working. It's also Wasatch Mental Health places a lot of the patients in there because of one bedrooms. And it overwhelms not only the schools, but it overwhelms public safety, it overwhelms the local congregations. Almost every social service available is overwhelmed and breaks down because it's just.
Now, the majority of these mental health issues, transit issues, alcohol.
Oh, yes.
Yes. How many total units are there that have been approved or you know, is it hundreds? We've talked about hundreds.
Over 1,000, but I don't know, the low income, I don't know how that compares to.
The last round, I think, that the state, that the Utah Housing Corporation approved, I think included about 350 units in Provo recently, and probably about 1,300 or 1,400 across the Wasatch Front.
What is the normal room rate or apartment rate for those, and how much of that is subsidized? Do you know what that percentage is?
Be no more than 30%.
Yeah, it depends on the family's income.
Okay, so in other words, if their income is 20,000 a year, it can't be any more than 30%, but maybe they're 10,000 a year, and so it really is very low income.
I think one of the issues that may be different in terms of how Orem deals with it versus Provo, you have your own housing authority, and we don't. We're tapped into the county as our only housing authority option. We don't have that, and because you have your own, you have more access to funding, as I recall, than what our funding levels are. And ours, again, basically ties in with the county. So our projects will be, you know, a number of Habitat for Humanity type projects, but I don't think we have. I can't think of any specific complexes that are designated as a subsidized housing or a housing authority.
I think we do have some small fourplexes,
Yeah,
things like that, but we
some
don't.
individual smaller projects.
We don't have anything on the scale of what you're talking about.
Right.
So we have a
But
consortium.
we also have of our elementary schools. We have 7. We have all of the Title I elementary schools in the Alpine School District are in Orem. So we do have a lot of the similar issues with, you know, the school and the neighborhood type of things, just not in a concentrated.
Yeah, most of ours are actually. I mean, I spent some time with them over there at Title I, just south of the mall, and yeah, they are mostly Hispanic families living in some apartments, some houses, and they actually are doing well. They're not high income, but they're also not dealing with mental illness, drugs, alcohol. They're basically families that don't have a lot of income, but are good, strong families, and even single mothers, regular families. But I spent a lot of time with them one weekend on with a bunch of them. Great kids, great families. Not seeing the issues you're seeing. I mean, they're mostly the breakfast in the morning, some help with books, maybe help with heating and whatnot.
I know there are some cities that are looking for more affordable housing options. And last year, I believe it was Highland, is that right? And that they ended up using some home dollars to build affordable housing. I'm going off memory. But Dan Gonzalez works for our redevelopment agency, and he, if you wouldn't mind taking just a couple minutes and talking about the home consortium and how that works.
Yeah, in terms of resources that come to the county through HUD, you're familiar with CDBG, you also receive the home funds. And the home funds are pooled as a consortium, where Provo is the lead entity, but the other two members of the consortium are Orem and Utah County. In terms of share of funding, traditionally the consortium has pulled the funding together for affordable housing projects in different areas. But over time, a lot of funding hasn't been consulted projects in Provo. Currently, this year, of about $1 million, we think of around $1 million of funds that come from the whole program. There will be anywhere about 45% or so that would be allocated for Provo. And then the remaining funds, it's about 26 to 27% for the county and the balance for Orem. The representatives from Orem and the county to the consortium generally look at pulling those funds together for the in a reactionary way for the applications that are coming in. Many of them through the Housing Authority and another two other agencies that receive that funding are Habitat for Humanity Administration and Rural Housing Corporation. I believe, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, they also go by self-help homes, Brad Bishop. These are more home ownership projects than rental projects. But as we look at how to use that funding, we try to, we probably should be looking at receiving suggestions as to where this housing could be used, could be located better, rather than reacting to what the applications are. It would be a good thing to be proactive about it and say, this is what we're looking at, and we would go to the agency and say, what kind of funding would you need to create a project similar to this area or that area?
So do you feel like that you're getting too concentrated, or that you'd like to spread it out in outlying areas where it's just a little here and a little here, so it's not so overwhelming?
Correct. And the need for the housing is, it's all over the county.
I heard anything about the senior market. I know that when I worked in Report, there was called the Rosebud, and it was a senior project that making their report. And are those kind of projects part of this?
That's correct.
As the seniors.
The Housing Authority is planning another project in American Fork, Pacific Drive, which will be also in the majority for seniors, citizens, but with other.
So would Orem
units
benefit
available.
something like that, a senior project in Orem?
We do have senior overlays within the city, and we don't have a lot, but we have some, and that has been helpful. We do have a fair amount of senior housing within our city.
What is the senior overlay?
So a senior overlay takes an area of the city and allows it to have some relaxed standards. So if I'm saying this right, I think it's like some smaller square footages as far as the building lot goes, things that are more adept. We have some, like on 8th East, we have some senior housing there that is smaller townhomes. So I don't have the specifics, I'd have to look at it. But
I have the ordinance.
yeah.
So basically, we just allow higher densities, and again, there's certain areas that I'd have to look at the planning map. We have 3 projects, well, 2 right now and 1 big plan as well. So one of them's 4 units, one's 8, the other one's going to be 4 units, but it allows more density, and then it's all tied to the rent can't be higher than a percentage of their income. So, or I should say that the household's income has to be 80% of the median income of the county.
Those developments probably more than the current idea.
They were just in residential areas, and we just allowed greater density because obviously they have to have more density.
It's more attractive to the
make
developer,
it for the
easier to sell.
So down in Springville, there's that higher density project, which is for seniors. That's pretty close to 4th South, I believe.
That's right off 4%.
And how many?
It was 31 units. Not all of them are for seniors. There's a few units that are designated for homeless and.
I think it's just low. Yeah, I think it's just. Oh, is it just depends? Or
Maybe
better?
domestic illness.
Just depends.
It's a 31.
Can I ask a question on, so housing is just one aspect of the needs associated with this demographic. And it seems to me, I mean, part of the reason you don't see too much in some of the other communities is we don't have the Food Care Coalition. The hospital is not in close proximity. There's a number of transportation issues in dealing with that. The types of access to to helpful resources are much more concentrated in Provo, which then would logically say that's where, from a housing standpoint, is why the housing is there as well. How would you address the issues of, if there are additional housing options further out in the county, how do you deal with the challenges of helping them get to the job or get to, you know, the resources that they need to further, you know, the rest of the existing spectrum? How do you, I mean, there seems like a big disconnect there from that standpoint.
Transit, don't they have subsidized passes for transit?
There are.
Options that way?
And you don't have access, I mean, but if the bus doesn't go by your house and it takes you 2 hours to get to where you're trying to go. I mean, those are all part of the issue.
Definitely, it's a bigger picture that needs to be looked at. But you're correct, one of the basic services, because it's the county seat are located in Provo, and it could also be helpful to help those resources be located in our areas.
So it would seem like if you look at where some of those other resources are available in other communities, that those then would be likely scenarios that if you're looking at master planning a little more beyond just Provo, but in the county as a whole, then you look for where are the 4 or 5 key resources that are a key part of the picture, as also a natural spot where housing options would be a likely good fit.
Or when you're building up areas around your intermodal stations on Front Runner and Bus Rapid Transit and some of those other areas where they would have quick access to resources. That just some thought going into that of what kind of housing options are you going to provide in those areas, in those intermodal areas. And I brought up Startup Crossing, and I think right now it's mostly young marrieds. I think it's like students, a lot of BYU students that live in Startup Crossing. So we mentioned the boulders. We also, I mean, there's a lot of people who qualify for affordable housing, and it's not the boulders, right? It's not the boulder scenario, but we also need to make sure that we can support what's going in for what it might come years down the road as well, right? If it's 80% low income, and what does it look like in 10 years? What does it look like in 20 years? It's a beautiful building right now, and they've done a really nice job, and I think holds them to some very high standards. But you got to think long term too when you have that high of a percentage of low income in any one area. So
When you have those senior overlay on sale of that property, do they have to sell it to a senior? Or
It has to be owned, actually. They're rental.
the real?
So it has to have one owner.
So the owner, okay.
Yeah. In fact, we had for a formal council candidate, Ty Reiser, we never had a chance to meet Ty Reiser. He's doing one of them, so he can speak to more about on the development side how that works. If our city planner here, he can speak better to the overlay. And I'd be happy, of course, to share the ordinance, so you have that information.
Part of the problem that we deal with in Franklin South, where the Boulders is, and frankly, it's Provo, Utah South State that has to handle all of the issues. Their mobility rate is like 50% for their stake. They actually bring in leadership from outside of the state and call people on a mission to be the stable figure and provide that leadership. Walking neighborhoods with their new elementary school used to be 80% mobility in the classroom. 80% of the kids would not make it through the year. And it's down, is it down to 20 something now? Yeah, they were really happy about the difference. And people in that neighborhood like to thank the efforts of Provo City in increasing not just the owner occupancy, but the, I guess, the feel and desirability of the neighborhood so that people want to stay longer. But when you're dealing with that kind of mobility, it's very tough. I don't know, I'd love to hear the stats on how many people in Provo that are low to moderate income are actually using the social services we talk about. We have some that walk daily down to the cemetery area to Wasatch Mental Health, to get their treatments. I gave a ride to one of these guys, and someone followed me and they said, "We're gonna follow you to make sure you get there alive, Dave." It was a little scary, but those people do have a reputation in the neighborhood, and yet I'm not sure how many people really are living here because of the social services that we have here. But they may be living here because of the large number of affordable housing units that are here versus elsewhere.
The point that we have a lot of social services is valid, but it also emphasizes the need to spread some of those out. So for those out throughout the county, there is no viable food bank in North County that really needs to be.
Well, there's a Desert Industries in American Fork. You know, that you kind of look at that scenario that does well to service, the challenges of breaking the poverty cycle. Karen McCandless works down and I love the program that she teaches and works in turning. What are the challenges that individuals that don't have access to the resource, how do they break that cycle? And a lot of it just depends on the only place, to go or where you can get the resources. And there's so many barriers to make it hard to get those if you live a long ways away. And I think those all tie to it. The BRT for one example could be an excellent reason why that could help expand or make it a lot easier to go from anywhere in the county to get on Front Nut or to get on the BRT and then make it to the facilities that they're looking for the healthcare or for those services that are needed. That's part of what we can do is how do we extend the accessibility to where housing is not what locks it into a certain area of the community. But it's not my expertise, but it just seems like there's some good activities going on there. I would love to learn more about it. I would love to see what we could do better as a community to help in breaking those poverty cycles.
We're going to be talking in our next meeting about forming a committee to address some of those housing issues and to look at some of these issues and invite HUD and invite some of those groups that advocate for this type of housing and get their input. They
really ought to be involved in this discussion because they're actually presenting you with a problem that you are now being forced to solve, but not of your own making necessarily.
Yeah. And we just want to do it well, right? We want to support these people. Let's do it well. Let's distribute it in a way that they can actually get the help that they need and they don't overwhelm any one area.
Sorry, I just want to make a quick comment. My name is Stephanie Romo. I'm with Online Continuum of Care, and basically we focus all of our efforts for our coalition. CFC focuses any efforts towards emergency shelter all the way to affordable housing. We had a recent conversation with Claudia O'Grady from Utah Housing Coalition. And she's essentially in charge of applications for low-income housing tax credits. And I admitted in a recent conversation that Utah County hasn't had their fair share. And so, and she actually mentioned that she talked to you recently and said that you're interested. And I really think that it's that transit line. I think that's why you have those purple areas, is because of the transit access. However, she says she does realize it is a problem, that it does need to be scattered, that it does need to be spaced out in some way. And she said, I'm willing to help you find locations that are better. So if you want, I mean, I could give her a call. I could invite her to your next meeting if you would like.
She's coming to her. Isn't she coming to
March 1st meeting.
Oh, March 1st.
Okay, great. So she's, that those conversations we're having, she's open-minded. She understands that it's not like usually gets the majority of the tax credits. It's our turn. I know that senior project on Pacific Drive, it was 70 points short this funding cycle for this year, which is really unfortunate because that was out of 7,000 points or something. But they're going to reapply next year, and so they're aware. I think the state is aware. She'll be a really good resource in terms of placement.
Okay, great. And this is the kind of information we need. We need to be able to make decisions and to try and do it well. Like I said, we want to be able to support the populations that we have, and we don't want to get ourselves in a situation where we're overwhelming
And just one more thought on that, because there's also a community understanding that the elevation, it needs to be elevated to where we don't get into the, not in my backyard scenarios or discussion. That by better understanding how a community really can be a big part of the support picture is important. And I'm not sure if there's really good programs out there that we can learn from to say, how are other communities doing in terms of communicating and dispelling the false assumptions that go along with subsidized homes, that we can have a better success rate in terms of where we find good locations, that they can be well adapted and well embraced by the community, is the other side of the coin that seems to have a lot of challenges associated with it.
I think that our school teachers, our fire, our police, there are people who qualify for affordable housing that are, it's so, it's not drug abuse, it's not, that's part of it, that's part of the issue that we face, but it's also people that qualify that are working, they're productive members of society, they're, they're helping, and so it's not the total picture when we talk about some of the social service, or some of the city services that are being overwhelmed. That's not the total picture of who we're actually, trying to accommodate as well.
Yet frequently that's where the neighborhoods go to, is to assume the only ones that we're going to get are the worst of that category, and that's true. There are really good people that are really trying to, find a better way to proceed, and that's part of the challenge.
When we talk about subsidized housing, we usually think of Section 8 or really low income people, apartments, the boulders, and yet in a larger sense, we've helped hundreds of families become homeowners in what really amounts to subsidized housing. We have in the past, whether through Provo housing or through NeighborWorks, bought homes that the neighborhood said, gee, you ought to buy that one. It's really run down. It's got a lot of crime. It's a problem. And so it's bought, it's either torn down or refurbished and then sold to someone who's an owner occupant. But that is at a loss because it's sold for less, it's sold at market price, but it was cost more to renovate and bring it up to code than you can get back. And then the people moving in maybe get a break on a mortgage or some other incentive to keep them in there for 5 years, whatever, maybe even 10, but something to keep them as a homeowner. And all those incentives are really a subsidy of and promoting the outcome that we wanted, which was to help people to be more stable and move them from being renters into homeowners.
Bryce, did you complete your presentation, unless you wanted to show us?
There was just a poverty map, and then this one, just where the low income housing tax projects are located. So those the last two maps. I think I'm done.
Did you want to show those quickly?
Well, this is the low income housing tax credit in Utah County. Over here. So this, the color indicates the number of units, and obviously, there's public housing. That's not just all low income housing tax credits, but HUD multifamily, USD rural developments, and so. There are some questions about where these were located earlier, and I just remembered that I had this map, and so I thought it'd be good to show this. And then the only other map I have is just the poverty, if you want to see that.
Yeah.
And the density of that poverty in the areas in Utah County, and so 41% or more, and that are fall under that poverty guideline would be living here. So that's right where the boulders is. And
What's the poverty line right now? What's the number?
23.
a percentage of what the median income is, and I think it's anything under 50% is considered impoverished, correct? For a family of four.
What I find striking on this, one is the darkness in the Provo, but two, the lack of any in them.
And
I've talked to Mary.
there are a few areas where there's no sufficient data, but for the most part, yeah, it's very limited. And then the other thing to consider is that a large percentage of these could be college students. So
That was what struck me is we look at kind of the south central part of Provo and start Green and think of Boulders, we think of South Franklin, and it is economically depressed. But the other pocket there, I would say that's just South Campus, Southwest Campus, South Campus. And I'm not as familiar with that area. I don't live there, but it doesn't strike me as having the same type of societal dynamics going on there. It may be college students, and then maybe poor. They may not have a lot of income, but they have enough to eat. Right? And maybe that's too broad of a generalization or whatever. But it strikes me as a little bit different that the things going on there, the social dynamics of students, may be quite different than what's going on in that south section.
So there's some really encouraging good news, I think, that comes out of essentially tying these 2 points out. We're talking about coming up with a more proactive approach to trying to address some of the issues. Because really the goal here is not to eliminate affordable housing. It's not to price people out of our community and chase them away. But we're trying to address some of the negative symptoms that result in a lot of those cases. And really I like the wisdom against that wall over there where we're talking about what's the reason, why is it concentrated on that area? Access to transit. And so with this first point, I mean, that's a really proactive way that we're helping distribute that across not just our communities, but as we have access to better transit here in Provo and Orem, that makes the connecting lines in our neighboring communities that much more relevant, because if they need to get to a job in Provo or Orem from South County or from North County, it makes it more accessible for them to get there. So I'm really encouraged by the fact that we are taking a really major proactive step. And it's not going to happen overnight, certainly. But that, to me, that's actually a really good outcome.
With future, I think there's a future BRT line planned for State Street. And
Also South County.
And so some of those areas, maybe future planning, thinking that if they're going to be along a route that might be a little bit quicker than the regular bus route. Or, and like I said, all the intermodal stops with the front runner too.
I have a related question, kind of a different topic, but related, and that's panhandlers in your community. And I don't want to get too far out with this, but I think we've seen some of Provo's panhandlers come to Orem. I just wanted to get a feel. I know you've done some proactive things. Could you bring us up to date on that?
Would you like to do that? Ordinance?
Yeah, it's been 2 years, 2 years ago, passed an ordinance that's, I think, made a substantial difference. And in the heart of the ordinance is that we prohibited the exchanging of money from somebody standing on the street, from vehicle to somebody standing on the street, primarily based on safety reasons.
Illegal for the person in the vehicle to hand money to somebody outside.
Accidental exchange,
Either way.
direction. And if you think about it, it's kind of a no-brainer that think about what we're setting up from a safety perspective. When an automobile suddenly stops in an intersection to hand money, and somebody doesn't know behind them that they're going to stop, it's not expected that they're going to stop. And that's given our law enforcement the ability to approach people primarily here on Center Street, but down by our mall, and issue tickets.
And who are they ticketing?
Well, theoretically, they're ticketing both sides. A lot of warnings have been issued. We have the advantage that if you issue a warning to that one good mother of 3 children that's trying to set a good example and handing out $3, and a warning to that panhandler, the next time it's a different woman in the same panhandler, this justifies a ticket.
So have you calculated the data on that as to how many mothers you're giving tickets to?
No,
how many panhandlers?
but I've had absolutely zero contact from mothers who've been issued tickets,
Yeah.
which is a pretty good litmus test to me. In 2 years, nobody has complained about a ticket being issued. And it's given the law enforcement a tool to control it.
And so what have the results been that you've seen?
Well, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know that it's kind of like this herd has moved up the street.
Yeah, it flares up, just like it flares up in your place. It will flare up, but our law enforcement has the tools.
So can I get a copy of that ordinance from you or Wayne? I would appreciate that. I think we see a growing problem in Orem. You know, one person brought up the thought, and in fact, there's a group that's trying to do this. Habitat for Humanity is part of it, where they would like to try to raise some funds. And we're familiar with this.
So we had Phil do with our fire department, and it eliminated that. There is pretty strong reason to believe that that was not a good thing to be doing to begin with.
Well, what I've been told, what they're trying to do is raise some funds and then allow people to pass out something to whoever is panhandling and say, you know, if you contact this funded group, then you can get food or assistance in some way in that realm.
Yeah, and we've not done that. I know a number of cities have done it, and with very degrees of success.
Because it seems like that our community wants to help those in need. I went out on patrol with one of our policemen. I said, so, all right, so I'm one of those who usually gives to somebody on the corner. And I said, so tell me what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, what are the results? And he said, well, 70% of the people that are out there are people that are going to use that money for drugs or for alcohol or whatever. 30% of those are in need. So Kenna Jo at Habitat for Humanity, she said, I can tell you who is in need and who's not. And I said, how can you tell? She said, I've done a survey and I figured out a way to tell that. And I said, all right, tell me. She said, well, just look at their shoes. She said, if you see worn shoes, holes in the shoes, you know, missing soles, that person's probably in need. If you see somebody with a pair of tennis shoes similar to yours, that person's not in need. Yeah, well, these those are industrial shoes. So I get oil and tar and
Well, it changes your behavior as a driver too, because you have to stop and think, do I want to take the time to park to give someone something? I was passing a corner where there was a lady on the corner with a pizza sign, and she didn't have any gloves on. And I had some gloves in my car, and I thought, I wish I could just give them to her, you know, out the window. And I thought, I can't do that. So, but you know, you have to kind of think, is it worth it to go and park? And I did go and park, and I gave them to her. But at the same time, it's not easy. You can't just pass it out the window. You can't pass money out the window to somebody. You have to stop and park and go take it to them. And so I think it doesn't happen here because, you know, but we also did, the police followed some of the panhandlers and found that what they were really doing with the money, and they videotaped the entire thing. And so that
police in Orem actually, when I ride with them, they say, we already know who these guys are. So we can tell you who that guy is, that guy is, that guy is. I can tell you that that guy is a druggie and he's going to use it for drugs. I can tell you that he lives in a duplex, he drives a nice car, has 2 kids.
And they're buying hotel rooms to go do it afterwards. So
yes. Yeah. So I mean, it's a growing issue because our residents and our businessmen are concerned because if you go to State Street and University Parkway on some Saturdays, you're covered on all 4 corners. And it gets to be a nuisance. You want to help those in need. You don't want to help those with drugs, but it's an issue that needs to be dealt with.
So I think you said something very key earlier is members of our community want to help. And the question comes up, you know, is this person part of the 70%? Is this person part of the 30%? And how can, and maybe they are addicted to drugs, but does that necessarily mean that they're a bad person and they shouldn't be helped? The beautiful thing is we have organizations set up to help. To me, it's a community education kind of thing. People in the community need to understand that giving to a panhandler isn't helping. It isn't helping. It's not likely to help that individual. It's not helping the community. It's not helping to have a good safety network for these individuals.
So I think it's.
How do you get them to the help that's out there?
One thing that I'd like to see, and you talked on some aspects of it, you know, these cards, I would love if I could carry around in my pocket, you know, in my wallet, 3 cards that says, here are the
I mean, you can carry one card that just says, you know, food or assistance or, you know, family or whatever, call this number.
Right.
We actually just
Yeah, so-
printed thousands of those
Wonderful.
last week. So
You printed thousands of those last
yeah,
week?
well, last month. So if you would like me to bring them to your next meeting,
Yes. Actually, I'd like you to bring them to my office.
Okay, well, we're about to do a blitz. We've been kind of caught up in point in time, but that's our next project, to do a blitz with posters as well as cards.
Or can you leave me one of your cards?
Yeah, I have them today.
I would also tell you that these people know exactly what services are available.
Right.
The bigger challenge is educating our residents about where to go.
But if our residents, and I understand, but if our residents have a card to give them, then they, on their side, feel like, yes, we have helped them, we don't need to give them money.
We tried it about the December newsletter, November, December newsletter, lists all the agencies, the two, the Care Coalition, it's just this long list of people. So they know where to give those dollars to. And it's just like they know which intersections to go panhandle at. They know where to go.
But for me, like, I would like to help. I don't mind giving some money to the different organizations. But I'd love to be able to say, if I saw somebody out there that to me looked like they really need, you know, here's a card, go make a phone call. And in fact, if you go to the city center or somewhere else, you can make it for free with a phone call.
Yeah. But if you pass that ordinance, you can't give them a card.
I understand. So an interesting sidelight of that is, for example, in our city center, we've had, in our senior citizen center, we've had problems in the last couple of months where people and the library are hiding in the back parts of those rooms so they can stay warm overnight. And sometimes actually they've been successful and stayed overnight. Sometimes we've had to route them out. You know, we're not as luxurious as Hawaii where they can just sit out on the sand and we're okay, but they have a real problem here. But you know, there are people really who have no place to go, and we don't really have a lot of overnight places for them to stay. I mean, we took away the Hotel Roberts, so
There are actually just a tiny handful that don't have a place to go. Most of them are going by choice.
it could be mental. But I would love to get a copy of the ordinance and one of your cards and some of your examples of cards.
I think though, when we get together and discuss issues, some good ideas to come up, we can work on together. But I think it would be great for our community as we work in ways to help get them the help that they need, but also to kind of look out for each other and get into the right direction would be great. So thanks for your ideas.
So speaking of that, it'd be great to have a little kind of conference and bring in all the social service organizations that we talk about. And say, you know, what's your perspective? We're only seeing part of the picture here.
That might be a nice idea for another Provo Orem combined meeting to have those people here.
Yeah, my understanding is the continuum of care is that it's that all those organizations coordinating together is the Mountain Community Care.
What we're trying to do is get it from that point out to the community.
Right.
So that's the disconnect.
Right, and so that's why we created these cards and these posters. By a blitz, I meant we want them to be in local areas. We want businesses to have access to them, so that if somebody is approached and they say, "Go get help, here's a card." So it is more so for the business, for the community to feel empowered.
I mean, I would love to have cards at the city center that people could pick up.
Right.
As Sam has suggested, show one of those cards in our newsletters, maybe put the information in our newsletters. You know, blitz the city and let them know this is available. Here's what you're actually seeing when you're seeing people out on the street corners. This is what it is. You know, safety is an issue. I mean, because there are two parts to this. It's not just the panhandle, it's the community. And we have a very strong community effort on wanting to help people. So I think those two collide. And crazy problem.
Do you think, and Stephen down there again can help us, but we've seen a lot of positive actions with some of the videos we've been putting out. I wonder if there's a way to do a joint Orem Provo video about the resources and how can we most effectively get them in connection and use that as a great source to educate our community.
I'm seeing a video in my mind that starts with Mayor Brunson walking. We focus on his shoes. For just a moment.
You do have another pair of tennis shoes.
No, I want you to know those are awesome.
But you know, to that point, I talked to my wife, so for the next day we did that. And so we go to a street corner, and we would look at their shoes, and she'd go, wow, that woman has better shoes on than I do. And I said, yeah, you're right. And then we went to another street corner, and they had nice shoes. I actually had not found bad shoes yet. I'm still looking.
You'll find most of the panhandlers aren't.
I understand.
I helped one time. I got in the community. I went to the caterer one time. They wouldn't give me all the food because we get so much food, we didn't know what to do with it. But here's $500 when you buy a car for us. So I had personal experience with that community, and the vast majority of the people you see on the street are not needy. They're panhandlers, professional panhandlers that do it for a living, and they make a good living.
And they make a good living.
Yeah. So my thought is, if we're going to do this blitz, and if we're talking about videos or whatever, I think we need to be blunt. It needs to be, if you want to help, this is how you do it. If you're just giving to handlers on the street, you're not helping.
They actually make the problem.
You're making it worse.
And we discourage it openly. When we work with clients, we tell them to stop and we tell them you don't need this, so we fully support any ordinance, we fully support any kind of contact, like any kind of conversation. What we have lots of trying to help does the outreach. He goes to panhandlers and says, you were talking to me at, in our appointment last week, why are you out here again? So I mean, we do counsel them one-on-one and try to discourage it as much as possible.
All I know is that since Provo has passed their ordinance, our panhandlers have doubled in numbers.
So anyway, we're very supportive of anti-panhandling.
And push the community to donate to these organizations that provide the services. I think with those cards, I almost want to buy them for 25 cents a card or something with the idea of
to raise funds.
Yeah, to raise funds, and that really that's the double, that's the other side of that sword.
Right.
Is the other side of that coin is we need to step up and better fund our.
Well, when you're actually buying them, you actually are contributing that money to those organizations that have then the resources to help people who are really in need.
Well, Mayor Curtis did a huge fundraiser in August that's been very beneficial to us as well. So they've you showed some leadership in helping us find permanent solutions for these individuals. So
We would love to help you as well.
So Mayor, do we get a ticket if we give someone a card out the window?
Well, we wouldn't encourage that. That's why we want them in the community
You
already.
can park your car and give anything
I don't know
to
what our
them,
ordinance
but you
says
can't
on
pass it
cash
through the
versus
window.
ticket, but it's still that safety issue. If you stop a car and go to traffic lane.
It's cash or
Anything.
anything.
Anything through the window.
So
You
to
have to
that,
park
to
legally.
that
and
point,
then-
you have somebody on the corner, but you're 2 lanes over at a stoplight, and you don't know when the light's gonna change. So then if you run your window down and show the money, then they're running to grab the money and the light's gonna change.
I'm just thinking it would be great. My kids love to do that. They kind of eat from the environment. That's part of it. And I don't want to tell them no, but I'd love to take my kids down and have them give money to you guys. And then you give them cards out that says, I donate some money.
Then just park your car.
And let the kids,
I saw an interesting approach to this in Salt Lake recently. I think it was near the Salt Palace. They had this little kind of like drop box where you could put money in. And I don't remember the exact wording, but it was something to the effect of consider instead of giving to a panhandler, stick your money right in here, and this is where it's going to go. Some of these causes.
That could be interesting education. Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's been an excellent discussion. Appreciate your willingness to join with us as we try to navigate some of these issues. And I look forward to our next joint meeting. I think that we should follow up with this and have some of these entities come and inform us and help us.
Could you maybe send me a list of who you would like to see attend?
Sure.
And we can work on a list as well. And then that brings up the question of when you would like to do the next one.
The schedule
It's
already?
already scheduled.
It's already
for the
scheduled?
city,
Yeah, for quarterly, I think it'd be, what, 3 months from today, is that soon enough?
yeah. They're scheduled for the latest.
All right, well, thank you very much, and we'll just take motion to adjourn. Everyone comments?
I'll make that.
All right, thank you, Mark.
I'll second it.
Mark Seaton with the motion and David Sewell with the second. All in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
Looks like we need to do
See you, Mark. Take care.
So I, in my business, well, so we're continually exploring other options. Yeah. It's part of a larger redevelopment project.